Nick and I are on our way to the airport, and we've been over at Ranch Ferries, and I had all these big plans of like, yeah, we're going to record all these podcasts, and lo and behold, we did a lot of talking with the headsets not on our heads. So to kind of get caught up a little bit here, Nick and I decided we were just going to do one on the road back, and this is something we've been talking about doing. If you guys like this, the on the road podcast, let us know. We've recorded them audio style before this way, but this is the first time we set GoPros up and decided to make a video podcast. But we talk about it on the road all the time. It's like, man, we just recorded a podcast right there, except for we weren't recording. So yeah, something we're going to try to get better at.
I honestly just now remembered or even realized that we had the cameras and that they're rolling. Like, I wouldn't even, you're setting them up, and I'm like not even acknowledging the fact that we're about to be video recorded. I had no idea.
It's great though, because I feel that this is, again, a common theme. As we get in the car, we start talking about certain things, we get on a topic, and we just will run with it for a long time. So it should be, in theory, pretty easy to record these. So as long as y'all don't mind a little bit extra road noise, maybe a few distractions throughout here and there when we see something funny, you know, maybe we'll have this at the ready too.
Yeah, you never know.
That way, if something funny happens that we see, we can try to capture a motion picture.
You'll be able to see in this video that I keep messing with my armpit. I got a sore spot right there.
Oof.
I don't know why it's sore.
Do you think it could be because you've been sweating your butt off for the last few days and maybe get a little chafing?
I think it's a little chafage because although I was showering every day, I wasn't applying deodorant every day. And I think that allowed for the chafing.
I think it was this morning, you were like, did any of you guys ever not put deodorant on for a couple of days in a row? And I'm like, yes. And you're like, not you. That's funny.
I said that?
Yeah.
I don't even remember that.
You were just like, not you. It might have been last night, actually.
Okay, that's why I wouldn't remember it. Yeah.
That would make more sense.
Yeah.
But I guess we were in the blind the other night, and we were talking about how your perspective of a place can change a lot as you get older, as you get more experience. And I mean, obviously we're talking hunting specifically, and I think that to start the conversation, we were just talking about Texas and how before I had ever hunted or seen Texas, I have this preconceived idea of what it is. And we talked about your experience growing up hunting Texas in the last driving podcast that we did back in November. And if you've listened to that, I mean, there may be some topics that we talked about in that, but really how it got rolling was my perspective from the outside, and then how that's changed over time, and what I kind of have realized I could get out of hunting Texas, and what I have got out of hunting Texas. And you were happy about that, I guess.
Yeah, I like, because, well, you know, we all know you're a pretty passionate person. When you feel strongly about something, you really let people know how strongly you feel about it, whether good or bad. You know, you in the way you speak, you get that point across. And so it just in the year, or I guess a little more than a year now that I've known you, it's your perspective, or like your idea, I guess, of Texas has changed, and just the conversations that we've had, and then, you know, another year's trip, or actually I guess the last year's only 2 trips down here have been in the last year.
Yep.
So 2 trips down here, and then, you know, me being around you, and we talk about hunting in Texas pretty often. I've seen your perspective or your idea of it change, and like we said the other day, and what you could get out of it. Because it's not, you know, we were saying how that just because the way the hunting culture is in Texas doesn't mean that there's just one way to do it.
Totally.
You know, you can take whatever styles you like from other places and bring them here and apply them and get what you want to get out of it, whether it's you're hunting hogs or deer or rabbits or raccoons, whatever. You know, you can take your styles and what you like and apply it here and get the same, if not more, out of it,
Yeah, for sure. I think that has been something that putting boots on the ground has really helped. Because what I was saying to you and Thomas is Ranch Fairy's son, and he's what do you say, he's 21?
Yeah, just turned 21.
He's hunted that ranch his whole life. That's his hunting experience, and he really hasn't hunted anywhere else. And he specifically said that's what he likes, is that he likes hunting there. He likes hunting that same area year after year. And it was the three of us having that conversation. And honestly, I wish we had him with us right now, but he peeled out the earliest because he had to go back to work. But anyway, we were talking about how when you're not from Texas, you just think about the feeders, you think about the hunting style, the
high
fences, exotic stuff like that. But when you actually go there and you see it, you realize that it's not all exactly like what you see on TV. And maybe there's aspects of it that are, but even once you're there, you realize too, well, I don't have to do it that way. And I think that from also that perspective of not being from here, I'm willing to admit now, maybe I wouldn't have when I was, in the peak of this other belief of, hunting in Texas is not for me.
Yeah.
I thought that, I think I was just jealous. I think a lot of times there's really this aspect of jealousy that plays into this, where we were talking about just property differences, and we started asking specific acreages of like places that you had hunted, places that Thomas had hunted with the ranch there, their family ranch. And the number is significantly bigger, generally speaking, than it is in the areas that I hunted growing up that were, my grandpa's got 2 80-acre blocks that are pretty close to each other, within a mile of each other, and 160 acres was the most land that anybody in my friend group that hunted had access to, like within their family.
Yeah.
Like by far. And then, you hear these stories of Texas, like, 1,000 acres or more, you hear that, sometimes significantly more than that, sometimes less too. It's all relative, but when you hear a big number and then you see the feeders, you see how everything's set up, you're just kind of like, ugh, like, we don't have 1,000 acres to hunt on, you guys are so spoiled down there. And I think there's a bit of jealousy that comes in with that too. Not to say necessarily that you want exactly that situation, but you want the land, you want the opportunity to go. And I think that another thing that I viewed as something that was totally true about Texas at all times was that you had to have this lease, or you had to own a big ranch or whatever, and if you didn't, you just weren't going to be able to hunt, and that excluded a lot of people. It wasn't necessarily, in my opinion, inclusive. But I think the things that have changed, to cut to the chase, I guess, is when I've been there, I realize, hey, not every corner of this property has a feeder on it. Like, I could still hunt in the ways that I like to hunt within this same property for deer, for example, and be able to pick apart sign, try to learn little details about what the sign looks like. I could still spot and stalk. I could still get on in-ground setups, or hunt out of a saddle, or call to deer, stuff like that. And that was a big change when I experienced that with actually being down here at Ranch Fairy's place. And then the other thing is I realized that when I talk to a lot of people from here, they all have these stories of hunting with their buddies on their properties, or bringing friends to their lease or their family ranch, or whatever it may be. And that's the part that I really like the most, is it isn't as it's not elitist, I guess, where I perceived it to be that more before I actually got to know people that really hunt down here. And I think that's something that you probably like hearing, because you know that that's true, right? You know that you and your hunting buddies and your hunting group is inclusive. But when I think that, then it makes you feel like maybe you're a bad, it makes you feel like everybody thinks you're a bad guy, and you're not,
No, we talked about it, last year, how, I don't know how many times we've had this conversation, but being from Texas, and it's the hunting culture, but then also the perception that people outside of the state have of hunting in Texas. I mean, you are the bad guy, because people are like, like you were saying, jealousy. They're like, well, we don't have that. We don't have 1,000 acres to go on, or hunting over feeders or whatever. But I mean, it's just, I like hearing people's viewpoints change towards it all, just because now it's like you're getting to see it through like more of like my eyes now.
Yeah,
you're getting more of my perspective of what it's like down here, and I like that, and I like bringing people to Texas and showing them that, like having, Greg and Jake and Ted all come to my deer lease, and Jake and Ted both kill turkeys down there. Like being able to share that with them and let them. Because even when it comes to turkey hunting, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you got that feeder? Just go get by the feeder," That's not what we're doing. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I mean, I've shot many turkeys off a deer feeder in my life, and if that's how you want to do it, whatever. But I mean, we were able to still hunt the way we wanted to hunt, just the same way you're saying you now see that you could deer hunt like my deer lease. The way you want to deer hunt, even though there's feeders on it, because this is how you got to think of it. In my head, it's just a little bitty cornfield,
right?
And you don't want to go set up in the middle of a cornfield and wait on deer to come filter out there.
Regardless, even if it's a big cornfield,
if it's a cornfield or a corn feeder, like, so what do? You go find a deer where you want to hunt them, closer to their beds, and so you do the same thing. There's a deer feeder right there. But if you go 600 yards that direction, you're going to get into their bedding area where they're coming from, and then you can get in there and hook and jab with them and hunt them the way you want to hunt them. And it's just like getting people past that mental block in their head of there being a deer feeder there. If you can get people past that, then they're like, oh, wow, I mean, this is just like hunting anywhere else. Because it is.
Yeah, totally. And I think that it is like everywhere else, but it's different plants and different ecosystem, completely different conditions. And I think that's what's got me excited to even just come down and film at some point and apply different tactics to these areas that I've never even hardly experienced until I started coming down here to hog hunt. Like being able to sneak through this thick, nasty brush where we find, a lot of times the hogs that we shoot end up running to and go down in. Like, man, finding ways to sneak through that and apply the tactics like the calling, the spot and stalk, the just really ultimately aggressive deer hunting style that really all of us at THP enjoy, I think would be really interesting. And I don't think that I would have ever been interested in it had I not just come and got over those mental hurdles a little bit. And also just kind of seeing how, I mean, to me, there's this interesting aspect of it too. This is maybe kind of going into a little bit more, I don't know how to explain this, I guess. Maybe more specific comparison of like public land to a big ranch, for example. This ranch that is the family ranch that we hunt at Troy Fowler's, the Ranch Ferries place. A lot of people hunt there. A lot of people come in and out. There's a gate one way into the place, and then you get back to the house, and then from there, that's kind of like the core. That's the center of everything. And from there, there's these very specific patterns. And how I found this out is I started running my tracker every time I would be on the property. So if we were getting in the buggy to go check out a feeder or pull a trail camera or something when we would first get there in the middle of the day, I would know where I went, and then at night, this is just a nightly routine I have no matter what. I always pull up on X. And I don't, maybe I scroll Instagram a little bit, but every night, darn near my life, I'll look at on X. And that's how I go to sleep, even on these hog hunts. I pop on my phone, look at on X until I start dropping it on my face, go to sleep. And I started seeing a pattern where there's these trails that we use every single time. It's kind of a like how we've explained buck bedding at times, where you can look at the bed and you can see that there's trails that come off of it, and it looks like the spokes on a bike wheel. We're doing the same thing as humans.
Yeah.
And in between those spokes, there's these big gaps where we never go.
Yeah.
And you start looking at that, and it's like, man, this is real similar to how I look at public land hunting too. Even though this is a big private land ranch, there's dozens of people hunting this place, and they're using the same patterns, because if they are hunting those feeders, which the majority of them do, or almost all of them, at least on this particular property, it appears to be that. If they're all doing that, then there's all these gaps where somebody that wants to break the mold has an opportunity to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool, and actually a comparison of private land ranch hunting to public land, where it is kind of similar, and you just get to see those trends. But had I never run that tracker, I honestly would just not really even know the property at all. I wouldn't have figured it out. But when I look at that, and I can start to see the trends, start to see the patterns, and then you're not just getting a bigger picture of what your trends are, you're getting the bigger picture of what everybody's trends are. And I just find that pretty interesting. I would say that's probably pretty similar to a hunt club in southern states that are east of here too, where there's a big property, a lot of members, a lot of people hunting those areas generally, but there's specific trends. So like one tip that I would have for people hunting places like that is start thinking of your tendencies, and then seeing if the other hunters in that area match those tendencies, and then see if you can break them. And I feel like that just opens up an additional opportunity, because you're always going to have those classic setups. But then if you can start to like think about the seams in between, and that's got me really fired up, because whether it's right or wrong, I would like to try to see what happened if you went and, middle of the rut, rattled in one of those thick, nasty holes where you get a little 20-yard shooting lane.
I mean, it's just like, so last year I killed that 8-point at my deer lease when my dad filmed it, and rattled that buck in. Like, we get so, and I've never noticed it until I joined the hunting public and started hunting with other people and learning different styles of hunting, and having my eyes open to what it's like everywhere else in the country. And I never realized how, cookie cutter we really are at the deer lease. We all hunt the same, do the same thing. You're hunting the same feeders, and you're wondering why you're only seeing these big bucks at night, and they're like, well, they're just nocturnal right now, instead of figuring out, okay, well, where's he bedded?
How can you close the gap?
Yeah,
maybe?
How can we bridge that gap there? And another thing, other than the fact of, changing it up on big acorn crop years where we got to get away from a feeder because they're not coming. You just observe where they're traveling through and then move to that. That was like the most outside the box thinking we were doing, But last year went down there, and we don't ever call to them. I've seen people, and people will say, well, you're from Texas, how do you never rattle? It's because they see Larry Wysoon doing it on all his old videos that, rattling in these huge deer. It's like, well, I remember being a kid doing it a little bit, and we just never had a lot of success with it, so we just quit doing it. And then last year, I hunted Kansas, Arkansas, Minnesota, and we're hunting deer in the peak of their rut. Iowa, we're rattling, and we're calling deer in, and I was like, okay, I can do this at the deer lease. And then I asked this guy in Arkansas, I said, break it down to me like, rattling for dummies. What is number one? What do I need to do to be the most successful? And he said, you need to be inside of 200 yards of where you think that buck is bedded if you want to rattle him in. I said, okay. I took that, went straight to the deer lease with my dad. We were pretty sure this buck was bedded in this draw. Granted, yeah, we were sitting in a ground blind that's over a feeder because he had been showing up there, so why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
But I was pretty sure he's bedded in this draw right next to this feeder area that we've got. And, I mean, so when I get there, I know if he's in there, he's inside of 200 yards. He's in that space. So got there and applied that I learned from a guy in Arkansas and rattled, and 60 seconds later, that deer comes walking out of the draw right there at 60 yards looking at me. So, and then I shot him for it. And so, I mean, it's just it's cool to realize how set in our ways we are, and then now try to apply different tactics to it to get something even more out of it. I still love going and sitting in my tree stand I got over this deer feeder that I've hunted for 20 years and killed just numerous deer off of. I love still going and doing that, but I'm also loving applying these different tactics and strategies to this same ground that I've already hunted so much. I don't know, I just like doing that.
Yeah, I think that it's not necessarily something that you have to up and switch overnight necessarily. Like all these things that we're talking about, like the aggressive hunting style and all the things that we talk about very often, it's a progression. Like you don't necessarily just go from hunting one specific way to completely flipping your style. I think that looking back on my experiences hunting more aggressively, even going from hunting a lot more private land when I was in college to after college making the decision that I just wanted to hunt public land. Like looking at that time, or high school, college time, to then the first couple of years out of college when I was starting to hunt public land, and then what that looks like compared to now, and just how much has changed. You don't have to necessarily say I'm done with the style that I've always done. I'm up and changing completely. It's just maybe mixing it up a little bit.
Yeah,
gives you more tools in the tool bag, really. And I think that
yeah,
to relate it to your story, it's like, well, now you're feeling a lot more confident. If you decide to rattle in some situations, you're going to be really precise with that tool, and that's a confidence boost in hunting.
Oh yeah, I've definitely gained so much more confidence deer hunting wise just in the last year. But like you're saying, it's just another tool for your tool belt. I mean, why if you got a tool, if you're trying to fix something and you have like the perfect size crescent wrench for this specific bolt that you're trying to get on, why would you take it and throw it away because you want to use some other more primitive tool now? I mean, like, why would you get rid of it in case you need it? Hold on to that. So you gather all the tools you can get and stay as in tune with them and up to date with them as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And then use which tool best fits your situation and your scenario. Like if I'm hunting my deer lease and there's a bunch of people down there, like a bunch of lease members are down there and we're all hunting, I know I'm going to be more regulated to a smaller area, 20, 30 acres maybe even, or smaller. I know I have a little area I have to stay in because we're all hunting and, don't want to encroach on anybody. So I'm going to stay in this little bubble. But if me and you go down there in the middle of the week and nobody's down there, well then we're throwing out every tool because we got 1,000 acres to run around on, and we're going to just go ram through it all and see what we can get into, And it just, so why, don't throw away tools. You need to be picking tools up.
Yep. Yeah. That's a really good, what is that? Analogy? Metaphor?
It can be anything you want it to be, honestly.
I got a question for you. Having experienced a whole bunch of different areas and varying terrain types, habitat types, different states, different conditions, what are other things that pop into your mind that you're excited about applying to your Texas hunting? Obviously the rattling is a big one and the calling, but are there other things that pop into your mind that you're like, man, I could do that and take that little snippet that I picked up on hunting this type of stuff and put it into the lease hunting?
Well, just the finding beds in general, finding buck beds, going around with y'all, scouting all these different areas and finding these bedding areas is like I've always known, like as a kid, like you're walking around and you're like, oh, there's a bed right there, but it never registered in my head going, pay attention to that. Where is it? What kind of vegetation are they kind of holding up in around here? Because we've got quite a few good deer usually show up on our place every year. We see them on camera, and then they disappear, and you're like, well, where the hell did they go?
Mm-hmm.
And you just keep going and hunting your feeder, and you're never seeing them. And then maybe they show up in the rut once, but they're there. You're just not seeing them come to the feeder anymore because they're browsing on some natural browse or whatever, and they're staying in their little nest that they've made up. Is now I want to go find those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to go get in these big cedar thickets and go figure out, okay, if they're living in here, I don't want to completely run them out of there and blow them out of there because, like I said, we got a lot of people hunting there and everybody's all trying to do the same thing. But I want to go find where they're living at and maybe go get between that spot and the feeder where they had been earlier in the season or late in the summer, and just see if you can catch them. If you get closer to that bedding area, you catch them, coming out, making a little loop in there and then going right back into their bed. Can you maybe kill a big deer, dude? I know you can, but that's like something I want to apply to hunting out there.
Yeah, it definitely excites me. Like learning about what cover types, and this is just at Ranch Fairy's place, which is, if you guys don't know, is a different place than what Nick's talking about when he refers to their lease. Two totally different properties, but when I look at what I've seen animals come in and out of over at Ranch Fairies, I like trying to understand, like, what about that patch of cover is more attractive than that one, because there's a whole bunch of them that can kind of look similar at first glance. Like, I know one difference between this year and last year is this year having a more realistic expectation on a baseline level of what it's going to look like. I was able to pick apart more specific stuff and say, this cover type has a little bit more of the it. This is what it is. This is what they like. And when I can see that, it becomes exciting to try to break it down then about specifics and hunting and how you would get in there to set up, like especially bow hunting setups. And I think that just in general, when you start to pick up bedding areas, it makes you feel more confident because you just have a bigger picture. Like obviously where they end up at some point. Even if you're not talking about a feeder, if you've just got a trail camera, that one spot, but that's obviously just one tiny little piece of the puzzle. And I think that just trying to get more experience picking apart a sign and what that sign's telling you. Some years you might find that they're using one bedding area more than others for some specific reason, like acorns, for example. That's one that changes deer patterns a lot, really countrywide. And I think trying to just get more experience in a place like Texas would be just interesting and would help you learn just the same as anywhere else. And I guess that's kind of really where I'm at with Texas, is I could still learn hunting Texas. Like, why wouldn't I learn? I know I will. I am learning just by hunting hogs. So, setting up. And the other thing that I think, I guess one thing that I talked about this morning that I don't want to miss, because I think it is important, is hunting Texas has made me remember that hunting in that style of a setup situation is still fun. And I also remember why it's nice to be able to sit down and relax and have those moments where you're just like, hey, this is what we're committed to. And when you're set up in a stand or, a little blind or whatever, which I guess we always set up on the ground other than the one time we were in a couple tripods, but when we were on the ground and we're set up over that feeder waiting for the hog to come in there. There's no question of like, should I be somewhere else? You're like committed to that.
Yeah.
And the last 2 seasons doing it with hogs helps me remember that when I'm in a deer hunting situation or even a turkey hunting situation, I get to that point where the tool that I need to use is the setup tool. It helps me commit to that idea and just be patient and enjoy it again.
Yeah.
It's helped me get back to remembering that while that's maybe not my favorite tool to use, my favorite tool to use is the stalking tool, where I know right where one is. If I can't use that, or that's not the right tool for that situation, then I can still be confident with the setup tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can be confident, still have fun.
Yep.
You're still hunting.
Right.
I mean, you're still out there doing what a lot of people want to be. Like, if you're mad because you got to go set up, just try to remember, be like, well, there's somebody somewhere that would love to come set up and hunt.
Yep.
And and hunt anyway.
Yep.
Throw rocks at them, spears, whatever. Hit them with a bolo. I don't know. But yeah, you still, and I like hearing you say that. I think that's cool that just in hunting Texas and what we've had to do here is it's helped remind you of that. Yeah, it's still fun. Yeah, like you said, it's not the tool you want to always use, but you're not shying away from having to use it because it's still an effective tool.
Totally.
And I like these, like this kind of hunting. I enjoy at times, especially with groups of people.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy, being able to, you can sit there and relax, and granted, if we were deer hunting, we'd be a lot more serious and trying to be quiet and stealthier and things like that. But still, you can sit and talk and just enjoy being out there with one of your buddies instead of, it just slows down the pace a whole lot. And it's not a bad thing to slow it down and kind of just relax every now and then.
Yeah, for sure. For me, getting back to that and just the actual feeling of relaxing out there is kind of unique. And I think that's one thing when I think back to that very first day that I sat in a tree stand setup, a ladder, whatever it was, when we were hunting hogs last summer. That was the first time in a damn long time that I had felt that, we're just sitting here, man.
Yeah.
Because I do like to move, and I do obviously really enjoy that more, but it was nice to just remember and enjoy that experience again, because I definitely had gotten completely away from it to the point where I forgot that I could even have fun doing that, if that even makes sense. Really, something that I would like to continue to know more about is just your perspective and like some of the things that have changed for you on the other side of the spectrum, like having grown up here and done this exclusively. Like what are some of the things that just keep that learning curve, like what are not learning curve, but what are the things that
keep right onto South Frontage Road.
what are some of the things that you've learned hunting these different areas, and just things that stick out as far as something new to you?
Well, just the style in which that we all deer hunt, the hunting public, I mean. That is something that I'm constantly learning. Like last summer when we were doing all the scouting, I was learning all this about finding beds and reading sign and things like that. Is applying those things that you're finding was all super new to me. Hunting deer based off of that, more of a you don't know where you're going to hunt them until you're hunting them, kind of, because you don't know where they are. Where my whole life I've always known where they were, so I know where to go. So I'm not hunting the sign and then the deer. I was just going and hunting the deer itself instead of trying to find the sign. And so that just made me, that really opened my eyes, and I found just such an appreciation for being able to hunt a place where you do already.
Onto Southwest Freeway Frontage Road.
You sure are rude, ain't you? made me appreciate what I have more of being able to hunt a place where I know where they're at.
Yeah.
For the most part, like I know where to go. Whereas,
In 5.3 miles,
Jeez.
keep left to merge onto US
when we're
59.
hunting in Missouri, I remember being so excited just find sign.
Yeah.
Like
Have a starting point.
getting just completely stoked because me and Ted actually had a spot where we could go set up that evening and legitimately have a chance to see a deer.
Yep.
Because we found such hot, fresh sign. I was like, I just now really appreciate what I've got so much more. But I loved that feeling. Like I loved that style of hunting that way because you don't know what you're going to come into or what you're going to find. And then it makes it all that much sweeter when you do find that starting point. It's just an awesome feeling. And I know that's a style of hunting that I'd never experienced before. And I really enjoy, and that's a style that I'd like to apply to more places in Texas, other than just the deer lease, but other properties I've gained permission to hunt. And another thing that's really changed for me in the last year is my confidence in public land. For what public land we do have, like where I live, the majority of the public land in the state is in that area where I live. So there is some opportunity there. Whereas before, that was super intimidating to even think about going and deer hunting those public grounds because I didn't know anything about how to hunt it. I just didn't. I'd never done it. And now I've got so much more confidence in myself and my ability to go into places like that and go find some deer sign and hunt the way that we hunted all last fall.
Yeah, I think that when I think back to that beginning stage of committing to hunting public land for deer, like the whole season, I had hunted public land for deer plenty to where I had somewhat of an expectation of what that looked like, but when you do it a whole season, you start to realize how important it is to kind of lose the expectation. And I think that's maybe one major difference between hunting private land and hunting public land is when you hunt a piece of land over and over again and you have a lot of experience in that area, you start to formulate this expectation that never really goes away. Like, well, that's always a good spot over there. So then when you go there and you do the same thing and it doesn't produce in the same way, that can be frustrating. But then when you go to hunt public land, if you don't commit a lot of time to doing that and aren't really able to appreciate the difference, it can be really frustrating to also go hunt public land and just not be on anything or not have any confidence anywhere. So I guess when I look back to the public land versus the private land days, the thing that is frustrating and I think can be a hard thing to tackle when you're trying to think outside of the box. Like thinking of back to that original conversation about mixing it up hunting Texas. It's like if you're in that boat where you're like, I want to do that, but I keep getting frustrated, it's like you have to just cut expectations. If you're going to try a different style and you're going to try something different, you got to just cut the expectation of it looking the same way that it did when you were hunting the place that you have experience in.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a hard thing to overcome. You go to a spot and you have some luck there. You're like, that's a good spot. I'm going to keep hunting there. So you do. And then every time you go there, you got that confidence. But then in a public land situation, there's so many variables. Or even a private land situation where you're hunting mobile, hunting aggressive, whatever term you want to put on it, you're thinking outside the box and what you've done previously. It's hard to have confidence in that. And it's still something you still battle with even as you get more experience. Like, how many days have you and I hunted together where, like, we just don't have that much confidence? It's like, it happens, Absolutely. But if you go and you get experience, you chip away at it, you start to, hunt in that style, that's just what you got to do to get the confidence. You got to just chip away at it. And I think that's the biggest thing to overcome. And that's why, you see these hunter tendencies. Like, again, using the examples of the Texas style or the hunting lease style, the generally like hunt club type style stuff where certain things get put into place, certain styles, certain stands, certain feeders, certain, places that people frequent. To think outside of that box is challenging, because why would you have confidence in going setting up in what feels like the gar hole? Well, there's nothing over there. Why would I go set up there? Well, maybe there's a bedding area there, but you're never going to know until you go try, or you start looking for the sign. And as you do all that stuff, you get better at picking up on what hot sign is and what hot sign that I want to pay attention to, or I assume is night sign. And it's like, I think of the question often, like, how do I know if that's night sign or daytime sign? I don't know. A lot of times we're just guessing.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to kind of use your other clues that got you to that point to say, this is probably night, this is probably day, or I don't really know, so let's try, and then if we see something, then we'll know it's daylight. If we don't, then we'll know that we maybe need to try and find something else.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that just comes down to experience, I suppose. So yet again, at the end of the podcast, what's the lesson here? Go hunting and get some more experience.
Yeah, go hunt. I think the lesson is, I think it's a couple things. Don't throw away tools. Don't discount any method or tool or strategy just because in your brain you're like, I'm not gonna enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
Assess your situation, and then from that determine what tool is best gonna help you be successful.
Mm-hmm.
When whatever that is, your success is that a harvest? Is that just harvesting one with your eyeballs? Is that just making sure you enjoy it? I don't know. Just don't throw away tools, and just remember to have fun.
Yeah. I think another lesson is don't look down on something if you've never experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Texas is an easy one to say, like, don't. This isn't necessarily recorded to say you should think positively of Texas. That isn't our intention. It was just to bring to light that this has happened for me, and I think it's something that we're both excited about for different reasons. Is like, hey, Texas isn't all that it appears to be, or doesn't have to be that.
Yeah.
And I think that's another lesson, is just don't necessarily look at a different way of doing it and say, well, that's easier because of this, this, and this. It's like, well, if you believe that your style is what works for you and you want to try to accomplish things in that way, then just go do it. And it doesn't, I guess let's put it this way. If you are the type of person that wants to set up in a tree saddle and shoot a deer that way, not over bait, you can still do that in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to spot and stalk deer and you feel like that's your style, you could do that in Texas. You could do that in the solid timber of Wisconsin. You could do that in the solid timber of Virginia if you want. I mean, if whatever your style you want it to be, you can accomplish that. And just because people do it a certain way, it doesn't have to be that way for you. I guess that's the take on the lesson for me that this conversation brought up, is it doesn't have to be any certain way. And I know we talk about that a lot, but I just think that I hear hunters put others down all the time. Like deer hunters specifically will be like, well, we just don't have ag fields, so it's harder for us. And it's like, every place has its own challenge, and every place can be as hard or as simply set up as you want it to be. I mean, the same thing can go for Iowa, for example. Is like, somebody could say, well, Iowa is super easy because, you just set up in a field corner and a big buck comes through there. It's like, well, the people that have hunted there know that it's not that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Same as that people that have hunted Texas know that it's not just that simple that you set up on a feeder and a mature buck's coming out every time.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that simple. And if you believe it's that simple, you can change your style too. Like that's I don't know.
Change it up.
Yeah, change it up.
Then it's on you to find what's gonna challenge you then and make it what you want it to be. Well, this has been a good intervention. I'm glad we've been able to have this talk, and you know, over the last year, I'm really proud to see how far you've come.
It is funny though, because I think when we first started hanging out, it's like obviously there's a lot of things that, you know, we're real similar in a lot of ways, but then it's like your experience hunting differed so much from mine, and it's hard to like at first explore that, you know, where it's like, man, I don't want to piss anybody off by being like, man, Texas is just a bunch of feeders, but it's like, like you said, I've definitely said that in my life. I mean, dude, I think back to like the stuff I'd have said about Texas when I was like 18.
Yeah.
Like, it would have probably just been the most cliche stuff ever, but who was I to say anything? I didn't never go there. I'd never even been to Texas. Which I just think is funny, you know? And like, you've been dealing with it your whole life, so I just think it's kind of funny to think about that. I guess with that, we're probably going to have to wrap up here. I'm about to make Nick pull over so I can not pee my pants through the rest of the car ride, and then Nick needs gas.
Need gas, need an energy drink, you need to pee.
Siri's been talking to us, but like we said, if you guys enjoy this in the vehicle podcast, I feel like it's something that we can do a lot. If you guys have any topics that you want us to cover, as always, leave a comment. Leave a comment and tell us what you think about the topic, because I feel like it's kind of a unique conversation, but we've been talking about it on our own anyway, so we figured at some point we might as well just hit record. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.